All right, guys, we're headed back up north. I know what you're saying. Like, you're a Texas boy. What do you keep going to Pennsylvania for? You'll find out very soon, because today we are talking to Iron City Distilling, and we are talking to Peter and Matt over there, and they're going to tell us the entire story of what the heck's going on up in Pennsylvania. Why are they making such cool whiskey? But at the same time, I heard something about a three-chamber still. Anyway, we could talk about that later, but I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on a Thursday night. I understand there's a lot going on. We're getting close to Christmas. I'm sure Santa's ready to get down those chimneys. So let's get right into the meat and taters. Peter, Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Let's get it going. My first question for you tonight is, if you were a sandwich, what sandwich would you be?
Damn it.
You going first, Matt?
That's a good one. I can't go first. I don't even know if I could go. That threw me so much. That's a brilliant fucking question. I love that.
So I will preempt that to say that Caitlin Barlamay from Hood River Distilling, aka McCarthy's, she's the one that said maybe you should start it like that, and I was like, hell yes, I'm gonna do that. So thank you, Caitlin.
I love Caitlin.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Probably a French dip. Probably a French dip. I love a good French dip. It's simple, but man, it's active. I have to engage with it.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, fuck me. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I'm gonna have to say a breakfast sandwich on an everything bagel.
Ooh.
So, got some.
I don't know.
We got the egg. We got eggs. We have a variety of meat depending on what your preference is.
Right.
Nice and sloppy. I don't know. Get your day off to a good start. I'm thinking.
I'm not sure, man. That sounds racist.
On an everything bagel, that's non-racist.
That's the most non-racist bagel there is.
It has everything.
Bagel in existence.
Exactly. Guys, this is I feel like we're already off to a good start. So let's go ahead and get into it. So let's talk about the beginning. Like, why, not why whiskey, but what got you into whiskey?
The very beginning.
The very beginning. In the beginning, there was whiskey.
Oh, Pete, yeah.
You want me to go first?
I led with French dip. So
yes, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, for me, whiskey started out as not a positive thing. Had some issues in youth and overconsumption, and I was in the restaurant business and really was more wine driven than whiskey. And left the restaurant business to get into wine and spirit distribution. And the first few months I had to take a trip down to Kentucky and walked into a room with about 8 a.m. for a training. Dave Pickerel was leading the training. And I think it was about 12 or 13 whiskeys laid out for each of us. And I was like, this is going to be horrible. I was practically gagging. And by the end of the day, I was sold. I was like, I love bourbon and I love whiskey. And then we went to Bill Samuel's house on the Ohio River, and it was it was an amazing weekend. And from that point on, I was sold.
Awesome.
I think for me, well, it happened in a couple stages. I remember getting invited by a friend to go to a whiskey tasting. I grew up in Middle Tennessee, about an hour south of Nashville, and I went to university out there too. And my parents don't drink at all, so it's not like I was really exposed to whiskey all that much. Even in your sort of indiscretionate use. You know, I didn't really drink that much whiskey at all, but I remember a friend invited me, and it was a tasting. It must have been a distributor, because it was a tasting of their Jim Beam small batch collection and and a lot of Buffalo Trace products, including Pappy and all this stuff. And you know, this was back in the day when you could get, you know, Pappy 15 for like $60. It was I mean, this was like several decades ago, you know.
Right.
So,
and it was actually on the shelf.
yeah, it was on the shelf. Like, nobody cared about it, right? And I remember tasting, I was like, oh my gosh, like I get it, you know, I totally get it. But at the time, like I couldn't afford even you know, even $50 on the shelf. You know, I couldn't afford it. I was broke. But I fast forward, I get through school, and I remember I actually thought that I was going to wind up. I was actually on the track for pre-med. I thought I was going to wind up being a doctor or something like that. And I remember I was sitting in a professor's office who had a lot of influence on me, and he was I considered him a really wonderful mentor and a great friend. And I remember he, you know, I was telling him, I was like, yeah, you know, I'm starting to apply to med school. And he looked at me and he was like, Matt, you got to shit or get off the pot. And I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, no, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do, you want to go make booze. That's what you want to do. He's like, you're always talking about homebrew and beer and making wine and all this stuff. And it was this really inspirational speech. And it was really cool. And so the next day I started applying to grad school for anything alcohol related. It was sort of like anybody that would take me. And I was lucky enough to get into Oregon State. I got a full ride, and they took me in, and I was in their wine program, and I thought I would wind up in wine. And wine is very seasonal. It's really difficult, even with a master's degree.
Right.
Which is what I had. I you know, finding a full-time job was next to impossible. So, you know, being from Tennessee, I started asking around, and a friend of mine was like, well, there's this distillery here that, you know, they're looking for somebody to kind of take over their research and development, product development stuff. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about distilling, but I'll talk to them. And you know, the interview went well, and I got hired on, and the rest is history, essentially. So yeah, so I wound up in whiskey that way.
That's awesome. And that's the thing. It's kind of, there's two ends of the spectrum there, right? We're like, okay, there's the back way in, and then there's the front way in, I guess. And, you know, sometimes you have to pay extra for the, anyway. But you know, it's one of those things. You got what I was saying, right? Anyway,
it took me a second. I'm very tired, but no.
It's fine. It's fine.
Equally in the gutter right now. So that's
exactly.
Great.
So it just makes it so cool that, like, whiskey invariably turns everybody into the nerd, right? Like, we all want to know, how do you do this? How do you make this thing? Because, like, every whiskey is a little bit different, and we're going to get into Pennsylvania style whiskey as well. But like every whiskey is a little bit different, and the regionalities and I hate this word, but I'm going to say it. The terroir of whiskey is fascinating to me. If they can talk about it in wine, why can't we talk about it in whiskey, right? Because I'm from Texas, right? Being a Texas boy, our whiskey is brash, and it's abrasive, and it's subtle and sweet, but it's like an abusive parent. You know what I mean? It's very nice to you, but then it also beats you up at the same time. All that being said, like, there's other parts of the country that are totally different than that. And I think the regionalities of American whiskey, no matter what you want to classify it as, bourbon, rye, American single malt, whatever you want to do, I feel that there is so much there. And why do I keep going back to Pennsylvania, right? Why is it that Pennsylvania keeps calling me back? Can either one of you answer that question?
Pete, you want me to take that, or you want to go?
How about I start, you finish?
All right, fair enough.
I mean, Pennsylvania has so much history. We were the biggest producer back in the 1800s, and the whiskey rebellion happened here. That we have the settlers had the knowledge, and so Pennsylvania, in essence, set the tone for whiskey in the United States.
Yeah,
I think that's a good way to put that. Yeah. It really did. So as a country, we've always been very spirit focused as far as our drinking habits, right?
Mhm.
When the initial colonists came here, brandy was arguably the first spirit that they were really making. Rum quickly followed, and you could make the case, and a few people have. You can make the case that we would not be a country were it not for rum. So we talk about the sugar tax and the molasses tax and everything. That all had to do with rum distillers,
Right.
And these were things that the colonists were rightfully so incredibly upset about. They were furious over it. So and a lot of it really tied back to their drinking habits. Beer was made, but beer is a really fragile liquid. It has a shelf life to it. Particularly back then, before the advent of all the technology that we have now. We didn't really have much in the way to grow excellent wine grapes or anything either. So spirits were really what this country was kind of built off of in a lot of ways. And, you get to the second half of the 1700s and then definitely into all throughout the 1800s, it really became whiskey. And particularly it was rye whiskey. And the mid-Atlantic, we hold a certain sense of pride working in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania was arguably the biggest of all those states when it came to whiskey. But you cannot discount New York or even Delaware, but Virginia and especially Maryland had some really huge distilleries, really prominent distilleries, very important to the founding of our industry.
Right.
And I don't want to discount Kentucky, but Kentucky didn't really become this giant in the industry until after Prohibition. There were definitely some important distilleries, and they were growing throughout the 1800s and everything. But it really was Pennsylvania and a close second, Maryland, that were sort of at the top of the pile throughout the 19th century. Right. So, and it was rye. And there's a lot of debate about why rye was so heavily used versus corn, and it's really not as cut and dry as people think. Like, oh well, corn didn't grow as well up here. Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but that's not really quite the case. Rye really was the grain of choice, and it's such a bizarre. If you think about it, in a lot of ways, it's such a bizarre grain to be popular. Because
it really is.
It's so polarizing for a lot of people now. I mean, we view it in the context of today, but it's so polarizing. All the weird essential oils, and then people talk about it being spicy and all that. Whereas corn, you make bourbon or corn whiskey tends to lend itself to. There's a lot of sweetness to it. People like that. And I'm not saying corn whiskeys are boring by any means, or they're simple or anything like. I'm not saying that at all. But rye is just a harder grain to wrap your head around sometimes for a lot of people. But really, it was the 19th century. That was the era of rye, and that was the more popular whiskey. We're talking about, before Prohibition, and you had the advent of all these things like, the World's Fairs all over the place, and, the beginning of spirit competitions and stuff. It was really Pennsylvania whiskeys that were winning all those competitions.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's interesting to kind of look back on some of that stuff.
It really is. And also, I feel, and this is just me talking third person, I guess, but rye whiskey is harder to work with. And y'all can talk about
Yeah.
this till you're blue in the face. Like corn, like it doesn't have enough diastatic power to even convert itself. Like it's a lazy grain to begin with. Like it's there for sugar and ethanol purposes. That's really all it's there for. But at the same time, like a high corn content is fine. Like it'll make good whiskey, but a rye is temperamental. You got to watch your mash, you got to watch your fermentation, you got to watch every part of it. Even your maturation in the barrel, you have to watch because sometimes, and I've heard from, I've had quite a few rye distillers on, everybody from Stolen Wolf to Liberty Pole to you guys, right? Like it's really, rye is very temperamental, even in the barrel. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it makes you be a distiller and it makes you be a distillery because it's like, hey, in 6 months, I'm going to be over oaked and way too weird, and you're not going to be able to sell me. So like, that's the thing with rye whiskey. You have to be on your tippy toes at all times. And I think that's why it intrigues me so much. Like don't get me wrong, I love American single malt. That is my new found love. Well, not newfound. I've been around it a minute, but there's something with rye whiskey where it's different. It's not new, it's old, but it's like people are revamping old recipes and doing all of this stuff. And it is such an arduous task. And then they're still making excellent rye whiskeys. So tell us a little bit about the process of actually making said rye whiskey and how you guys combat all of the rye fighting back with you.
Right. So you mentioned Liberty Pole and Stolen Wolf, and we're friends with both those companies, particularly Liberty Pole. They're about 45 minutes away from us, and we hang out with those guys on somewhat regular basis. And the Stolen Wolf guys we talk to pretty frequently as well, and they both make really fantastic whiskeys.
Absolutely.
Very different from each other, and very different from what we're doing too,
Right.
which really gives you a sense of just the breadth that rye can show. There's a lot of character that you can play with, and there's a lot of techniques you can use. And each one of these three distilleries, us, Stolen Wolf, and Liberty Pole, all kind of work with our own little eras of history. And so, Liberty Pole really focuses on colonial style rye with a little bit of a modern twist.
Right.
They come in, they play with some stuff, and they do some really novel things. I mean, one of my favorite things they've done is a peated rye, and I
absolutely. Yeah.
It's such a good whiskey.
It's so good.
And then Stolen Wolf has this really cool history in that the Stoll in part of the name is Dick Stoll, who was the last master distiller for Michter's before when Michter's was still in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately Dick passed away a couple of years ago, but he had this wealth of knowledge about 20th century Pennsylvania rye and how to do it. And they make such a unique spirit. I've never tasted a rye whiskey like theirs.
Right. You're right.
And I mean that in like the best way possible. It's really incredible stuff. And we're trying to resurrect sort of what we consider the golden age of Pennsylvania rye, which is sort of between 1850 and up to Prohibition. So that 70-year period there, where this was sort of the capital of whiskey in the United States. And, and we've been very fortunate to get to taste some of these ryes from that era. We were actually just at a tasting the other night that we were invited to, and we got to try stuff from, early 1900s, late 1800s. And it was really rewarding. But rye is, on some levels, it's a really difficult grain to work with. On others, it's actually it can be a little forgiving, surprisingly. It kind of depends on how you approach it, and it kind of depends on your equipment. The biggest thing everybody complains about is that it's so sticky.
Mhm.
It's like cement if you're not careful. Um, so, historically, what they would do to combat that is they would use a lot more water in the mash, which
Right.
would then drop the alcohol level down.
Right.
And so the average ABV of the fermented mash at the end of a couple days would be maybe 5-6% tops.
Right.
Compare that to today, where it's usually between 8 up to 10% or even more.
Right.
Um, it's very different. But they had to kind of dilute the mash down back then. We kind of split the difference. We're just above 8 on ours. Off the top of my head, I don't know what Liberty Pole and Stonewall are doing, but I suspect they're probably
They're
similar.
about the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect that. So we deal with that, but we also do 100% rye in our mash, which back then would have been considered what they call an all rye. There were these whiskeys that came out, and you would see on the label it would say all rye, or that's how they would advertise it. Pennsylvania also had what they called pure rye before Prohibition, and then after Prohibition ended, the Tax and Trade Bureau and all the governing bodies would not allow the word pure to be used because it implies like health benefits and all this stuff. But all it really meant historically was Pennsylvania's way of saying this is straight whiskey.
Right.
That's all it meant. So Kentucky used the term straight. We used the term pure. They meant effectively the same thing.
Right.
They weren't adulterated. You weren't mixing in anything. There were no colorants or fruit juices or sulfuric acid or all these other things that they would blend into whiskeys back in.
Right.
It was just straight whiskey. So we actually tried to get that past the TTB recently, and we kind of knew what was going to happen, but they were like, "No, you can't do that." Anyway, so no, I think one of the things that is really interesting about rye, and one of the challenging things, is that it's just the simple fact that it is so polarizing for people. The grain itself has all this wild character to it, and it is a lot like wine grapes in a way. And I'm using that analogy intentionally because I loosely come from the wine world, but you would not generally confuse a Pinot Noir with like a Syrah grape or what have you. For the people that watch this that are wine fans, unless you're in California, in which case they're basically the fucking same thing. But that's not true. But it kind of is. So no, you wouldn't confuse it. They have different varietal characteristics, right?
Right.
Rye is like that. Rosen rye is different than Danko rye, which is different than Aroostook or all these Prosecco and AC
Bruzy.
Hazlet. And, we can kind of go through all these, right?
Yeah.
They're all different from each other. I can't really. I was talking with somebody about this earlier today. I can't say the same thing about barley varieties, for instance. All right. And it has a lot to do with what the industry has done to breed these varieties. So barley varieties have been bred with the idea of we're going to breed them to increase disease resistance, and we're going to breed them to increase yields, and blah, blah, blah. Rye hasn't really been approached the same way. Wheat is kind of similar to barley in that regard. Like wheat varieties, and I know there will probably be people that argue this, but most wheat varieties, when you distill them, are not going to be wildly different from each other.
Right.
Unfortunately. Foreign is sort of the odd one in that there are a lot of corn varieties, and they are very different from each other. Obviously, the yellow debt number 2 that gets used the most, it's not meant for human consumption.
No, it's not. It's a commodity.
It's not. I mean, it is quite literally not intended for human consumption. It is the bulk of it is used for fuel, ethanol, and
feedstock,
livestock feed. That's all it is. It's not that it makes bad whiskey. It does make very good whiskey. I mean, there's a lot of whiskey made with it that I really enjoy personally. The That being said, as a small distiller, and we're arguably the biggest whiskey distillery in the state of Pennsylvania, which, by the way, means nothing
Right.
compared, Owen Martin, the master distiller for Angel's Envy, is a friend of mine, and I asked him a while back. I was like, "How many barrels a day are you guys doing?" It's like, "Oh, we're small. We do about 135 a day." And I was like, "If we ran 24/7, that's about what we could do in a week." So it's a very different thing, right? Like we do a drop in the bucket kind of thing. It's fine. But I can't compete with those guys scale or how low I can get the cost on the bottles and all that stuff. Like I can't do that.
Yeah.
What I can compete with is on hopefully the experience. Right. And so that's why we chase after these heirlooms. We work with the different corns, we work with the different ryes. We chase after those because they cost, in some cases 10 times more per pound than what your standard yellow dent or field rye would be. But I can get more flavors out of it. And so we do everything we can to kind of nurture those grains through the process so that we actually maintain that grain character in the whiskey. And there's a lot of ryes, like Whiskey Advocate just did their top 20 the other day. And the number one was Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Rye, which by all accounts, well, we could have this debate, like whether that was a good choice or not. I think it was very safe.
It was safe. Yeah.
I think it was very safe. It's basically Rittenhouse, and it's Pikesville.
Which isn't bad, isn't bad rye whiskey. Like, don't get me wrong, it's fine, but it's the bourbon drinker's rye.
It is. You can take a lot of those, Rittenhouse at one point, it was made in Philadelphia. And it was an 80-20 recipe. Old Overholt was an 80-20 recipe. And all these Pennsylvania brands got purchased by the Kentucky guys, and they get, Pikesville was a Maryland brand, but once again, different recipe.
Yep.
Right. So they bring all these brands down, and they really just bought the brands. That's what they did. Absolutely. They didn't care about the recipes, unfortunately. So very different whiskeys. And I'm not saying they're bad whiskeys, but I can put Rittenhouse in front of most people. It's a 51% rye.
Right.
So it's a barely legal. I can put that in front of somebody next to a high rye bourbon. Right. Have people taste it blind. Most people, and probably on a lot of days, even the guys
making here,
most of us wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
No.
Wouldn't be able to tell you which one was a bourbon or which one was a rye.
Right.
That's unfortunate. Right? They cook the grain to death. So all the aromatics go away. It's much more pleasing to folks that don't know rye, but it's like, oh, I can get into rye this way. So I do think those whiskeys have a place. I do, but I think if you really want to experience rye, I think there are a lot of really wonderful distilleries right now that are playing with this grain, that are letting those aromatics shine, letting the character come out, balancing the oak with the grain character in such a way. Kentucky whiskeys are wonderful, but they are very barrel forward, sometimes to a fault.
Yeah.
And once again, I'm sure the Kentucky guys, make arguments against our stuff, and whatever. I don't care, but they make great stuff. I feel like a lot of people up here make great stuff, but at the end of Prohibition, the Pennsylvania guys kind of lost the war in a way. So like, they don't really get to tell their part of the history. So many people up here, they don't actually even know what the history is. They don't realize how big of a role this state played in whiskey. So it is kind of wild. And so when you let people try this stuff and you kind of explain it to them, and it is much more of a hand sell, right? Like, you do have to get in front of people, and you do have to tell them, like, hey, this is what we did, this is why we did it, and this is the history behind it. Once they kind of get that, like, it's really cool
Yeah.
to engage like that. But yeah, and it's growing. We're seeing more and more of it. But it's a one step at a time.
Absolutely. Okay, so my next question is for Peter. Okay, so as the president, how do you make money at rye whiskey when rye whiskey takes a back seat to bourbon?
I mean, re-educated. I think rye is turning the corner. It's a rye renaissance, so to speak, and educating the consumer. I mean, we have a lot of people that come in and say, "Oh, I don't like rye," and then we're like, "Well, wait till you try ours," and oh my gosh, it tastes great. I think you know rye was kind of overlooked, and the rye that people were drinking was not the best rye, so people have a negative thought about it. And really, all those producers that you've been talking about, Liberty Pole, Stall and Wolf, and others in Pennsylvania, we're on a mission to make Pennsylvania rye, well known, and people know, a what is it? The rising tide brings all the ships up. We all have to work together to educate the consumer to help them understand that this style of rye whiskey is not the style of rye whiskey that your grandfather was drinking.
Right.
And I use the analogy with tequila, going back 10, 15 years, if someone's sitting in a bar and says, "Let's do a shot of tequila," most people would make, a funny face and be ready for Cuervo Gold with with salt and a lemon and or a lime. And now you have how many 100%, blue agave or Weber Blue tequilas that people sip, just neat, and would have never thought that. So I think we have to kind of follow that path of tequila and show we're a delicious world-class whiskey that you will want to drink.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense because, when I was talking to Herman over at Dad's Hat, he was saying,
Oh, that's really
I let, yeah, that's one I wanted to kind of leave out because he plays a special part in my heart because he told me, he's like, I don't give a crap about age statement. I don't care about any of that. I pull the whiskey when it tastes good. I don't care if it's 16 months old, 4 years old. It doesn't matter. When the whiskey tastes good, I pull it. And that's how it should be. Like, I understand here, there's something with, and I think this goes from Scotch days and stuff like that, where we're like, it's a 12-year age stated, single malt or whatever. But like, here's the deal. I've had so many different whiskeys that are 18 months old, 16 months old, 10 months old, even, and they're in smaller profile barrels or whatever, and they are absolutely fantastic whiskeys. So it's not so much the age, it's the distilling habits, and we can talk about that as well, which we got a lot to get into, and I don't want to keep you guys all night, but like, also it's like just making good stuff, like make good stuff and make your cuts the way they need to be and put them in good barrels. Obviously, that's the next thing you need to do. And then when they're good, pull them. And so do you guys have like a regiment that you go by, or is it just similar to that? You just pull it when it's good, or are you trying to meet some sort, which I understand like 2 years is the normal, like, straight rye whiskey or whatever. But like, is there a specific lane that you guys are trying to go down?
What do you think, Pete?
No lane. It's I would say exactly. When the whiskey's ready, we're but we're also very patient. And if something isn't ready, and we have a heated warehouse, so we do have some mature. It helps the maturity with the heat, constant heat, and we can see some differences between the stuff on the 6th tier versus the stuff on the 1st tier. So, but I mean, we're going to be releasing our first ever single barrel, and in 8 days. Well, yeah, tomorrow will be a week from tomorrow,
Oh wow.
and it's going to be about 2.5 years old. And I would put that up against. I mean, I'm a big rye drinker. I put it up against any of the ryes that I've been drinking for the last 10 years.
Wow. That says a lot. That says a lot. That's awesome.
Pete's a liar, so you can't trust him.
I mean, he's on the show. Like we have to at least appease him a little bit, right?
I mean, when we get Lou Bryson's in tasting our new make and tasting some young whiskeys, and he said twice that our whiskey is the best new make whiskey that he's ever tasted.
Wow.
I mean, it's pretty high praise from a very
absolutely. I mean, his book is right here behind me.
Yeah.
Tasting whiskey. So I mean that's big praise. But at the same time, you guys don't want to meet just the hype, right? You're not just trying to make rye whiskey to make a rye whiskey because you're in Pennsylvania. Like there's a heart behind it. And one of the things that you guys are doing, and this is my caveat into the next section, as you well know, is I heard from Jim over at Liberty Pole that you guys are developing or have already developed the second only in the United States, as we know, 3-chamber still. Is that correct?
Kind of.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I offer. So yeah, let me qualify that statement a little bit. No, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's
Jim,
a little more
Jim might have crossed the line, so we'll just say that.
No. Like I said, I mean, Jim and I are buddies. I love that he said that. But so yes, chamber stills are the type of still that was prevalent in Pennsylvania making whiskey throughout the 1800s, early 1900s. And really, there were a few that were kind of left over during up until like the late 1950s, we think. Maybe early 1960s was when the last one was decommissioned. And that was really it. Like the technology kind of disappeared, unfortunately. And to understand this type of still and why it was so important, these stills operate under very high pressure, right, relative to atmospheric pressure. Usually a couple psi over atmospheric pressure, which what that does, without getting too deep into the weeds here, what that does is that increases the boiling point inside the still, and it allows you to extract things that you would not otherwise be able to extract at your standard atmospheric pressure. So these are very heavy spirits, right? Like I said, we've been fortunate to taste kind of vintage versions, like pre-pro whiskeys that have been made on these stills, and we can attest that we kind of see where our still is doing and all that. The short history of the modern chamber still was that Todd Leopold of Leopold Brothers in Denver, Colorado, back early teens, he's looking through some papers and he realizes there's all this mention of a chamber still. He does more research into it, finds a little bit more writing about it, and he commissions Vendome Copper and Brass Works in Louisville, Kentucky, to make a chamber still. They had made them in the past,
right?
But like over 100 years ago,
right? So they didn't remember.
So he worked with them to kind of design it, and that was it, really. Like he brought the chamber still back, but he brought it back to Denver. And no disrespect to Denver, but Denver is a much higher altitude, which does change things quite a bit.
Absolutely.
As far as boiling points inside the stills and all that. These stills were unbelievably prevalent throughout the Mid-Atlantic, though. Maryland and Pennsylvania in particular. And so I was the consultant for Iron City Distilling. I was running a distillery in Canada, actually. And I got a call one day asking if I wanted to consult on a rye whiskey distillery. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Sounds like fun. And I'm from the States, so, why not? So I helped them build the distillery, not really thinking anything else. And, my part of the job is done. A couple of months go by. I get a phone call from the project manager, and he was like, "Hey, we're having a hard time finding somebody that meets the job description for the master distiller that you left." And in my head, I was like, "Well, it's because I kind of wrote my resume down." But like the I told him, I was like, "Well, I would, I'd be interested." We were talking about, because it turns out Quebec is fucking cold.
Yeah, really?
And
What a thought.
like all the time.
Yes.
It's weird, but they just insist on. It's like everybody has the air conditioning on constantly. I don't understand what their deal is. Anyway, so we were like, it's time to maybe it's time to move back. So they offered me the job, moved back, and we're getting everything kind of set up. And thing was that I told the project manager one day, I said, if I'd known it was going to be me running the place, I would have done this a little bit differently. We had this beautiful 1,500 gallon pot still and all this stuff, but I was like, I kind of work a little bit differently. I designed this place for somebody else.
Right.
And he was like, "Well, what would you have done?" I said, "I would have done a chamber still." He says, "What's that?" And I describe it to him and why it was historically important. And it's just one of those things. Like, I just didn't really think much of it. A couple of days later, the owner comes to me and is like, "Hey, I heard you were interested in a chamber still. Can you explain it to me?" Turns out, my buddy had, talked to him.
Right.
And so I was like, "Well, they're kind of different." And I explained everything to the owner. He was like, "We'll get a price." We were still under construction.
Right.
We hadn't distilled a drop yet.
Right.
I get a price, and I remember calling Vendome up, and I talked to my buddy Kyle at Vendome, and I said, I was like, "You guys probably are doing a few of these right now. What would it take for you to do another one?" He was like, "No, we've only done the one."
Shut
I was
up.
like, "Really? Really? Okay. Well, why?" He was like, "Well, we've had a few people ask about them. Every time we give them the quote, they don't want to do it because they're expensive.
Yeah.
It's a lot of copper. It's a lot of engineering." Okay. So I get the quote, and I give it to the owner. And this is with like a few extra fermenters too. But before we'd even distilled a drop, we were already doing another $1 million expansion on the place, which was insane. So we get the still in, we commission it in the fall of late summer, early fall of 2024. We'd already been laying down barrels of pot still, but that was the history of the whiskey in this state, was that there weren't chamber stills here.
Right.
It was pot stills and/or chamber. Well, I should say there weren't column stills. Yeah. So there weren't column stills here. There were pot stills or chamber stills. That was it.
Right.
Kentucky had the column stills, and there's nothing wrong with column stills, but they make a different spirit.
They do.
Right. It's not that it's better or worse or anything. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we really wanted, that was sort of my goal. I was like, I want to recreate that spirit. And nobody had really done it. A few people had kind of leaned into it a little bit. Leopold Brothers had, but they left a lot of other things out of the equation.
Right.
And I mean, no disrespect to Todd. I really don't, because he makes good whiskey. But I wanted to kind of take it to this like very almost illogical extreme, So we were like, all right, we've got the chamber still, and we're going to steam heat the warehouse, which is what they did back then. And we're going to do the low entry proof. And we found an old mash bill that, that worked, that wasn't just a simple 80-20 and, all that stuff. And, I had like all these little boxes that I wanted to tick. Probably one of the hardest ones was actually, and we only do a few of these barrels every year.
Right.
But probably the hardest one was actually the barrel size back then was anywhere from 35 to 42 gallons.
Mm-hmm.
It's what was called a tierce, TIERCE. Very odd shaped barrel. I couldn't find anybody that would make one for me. Finally, was at a conference 2 years ago, something like that, and got to talking with Cooperage in Minnesota, and they were like, "We'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool project. And so they resurrected this 40-gallon barrel for me.
That's awesome.
And we do about 50 of them a year. It's not
Right.
a lot, I mean, most of our stuff is 53 gallons, but
Right.
I mean, it was really cool. Like we wanted to be able to recreate this long haul style as close as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it became really, we became really obsessed with it. And then, and those beliefs, that ethos kind of bled into the other whiskeys as well. We were like, all right, well, I guess we're making bourbon. Well, what if we used Hickory King? Like that was the corn that was used back then.
Yep.
It's a headache to grow.
Yep.
And it doesn't yield as much, but like, what if we did that? Okay, so now we're doing that.
Matt, can I insert one quick note on those barrels?
Please do.
Yeah.
We're 46 minutes in and you haven't mentioned Bob yet. I'm just surprised.
What about Bob?
What about Bob?
There's
those
two
barrels.
the
40-gallon barrels are 20% less yield and 50% more cost than our typical than our 53-gallon barrels. So
I should mention our accountant. There are two Bobs in my life. One is our farmer, Bob McDonald. Old McDonald, yes, he does indeed have a farm. No, he grows so much of our grain for us, and he's about 2.5 hours away. He's wonderful. But we have Bob, our accountant, who I'm pretty sure hates me. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm fairly certain. He thinks I'm nuts, and this kind of gets back to the chamber still thing again. People wonder, like, well, what if it makes this really interesting whiskey? Why don't people use them anymore? And it's because when you actually start working with them, it's not just that they're difficult to work with, it's that they are physically demanding.
Yes.
They are financially demanding. Efficiently, that's laughable.
Yeah.
Like there's all these things that are wrong with them. And so no sane accountant would ever let a distillery run one of these.
Right.
The steam requirements.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a whole problem in and of itself. I remember talking with Vendome and saying, "All right, can you give me a ballpark of what the utility usage is going to be? Because we have a boiler, and and they were like, oh, it's probably about 1 million BTUs an hour." And I said, "Okay, all right, I was like, we can handle that. That's no problem. Our boiler's more than big. Yeah, actually, we could. We definitely had the capacity. The thing was that, and this was through no fault of their own.
Right.
They didn't have they didn't have the data points, and so they were comically off base. The amount of steam was probably a good 2.5 times more than what they said it was. And so we get everything installed and we're like, it's not running that well. Like we were like, this is really weird. And then we would shut every other piece of equipment off in the distillery and all of a sudden it would magically run. And we immediately saw the problem. You're like, okay.
You're like, we don't have enough power going to this.
Yeah, we don't have enough power. So fortunately, our sister company is Pittsburgh Brewing Company, and they're in the next building over from us. They're 20 feet away.
Right.
They have 2 ginormous high-pressure boilers, one of which they don't use. Okay. So we, through some great expense, piped one of those boilers over to our distillery, and now our boiler is basically redundant. And go figure. But we changed everything for this thing. Right. The amount of work that goes into running one of these things. We talk about heads, hearts, and tails, and the fractions that come off the still. The heads off of our pot still. I have that timed out almost down to the minute. It's about 34 minutes.
Really?
Yep. We actually do a pretty conservative heads cut off of our pot still. And then the hearts.
And that's 1,500 gallons. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. The hearts fraction is probably about almost 3.5 hours, and and then you have tails and all that. That whole run between the 3 fractions on a pot still is about 8 hours,
right?
Give or take. Okay. A run on our chamber still lasts about 35 minutes. The heads fraction itself, I've timed it. The heads fraction itself lasts anywhere from 60 to 75 seconds. So, like, and then the hearts fraction is maybe 8 minutes. I'm trying to remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's about 8 minutes. And then the rest is tails. And then there's all these like kind of weird tails recycling programs we have to do and all
like
that stuff. But
congeners and all the recycling the things.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, but we've run it the way it was run 120 years ago.
Right.
So you get this incredibly unique spirit of it that you honestly could not do any other way.
No.
You really can't. Believe me, if I could, I would. It's just it makes no sense to run one of these things because it's so difficult. The fact those fractions happen so quickly, that's a lot of work for the distiller. I ran the thing almost entirely by myself. One of my guys would come in and do like kind of the night shift for the first year. And if I wanted to even get up and go to the bathroom, I had to have somebody come over and watch it because things happen like that.
Instantly.
Yeah. You have to baby it. So, and it does, and there'll be runs that just for some reason it just doesn't want to behave, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's rare, but it does happen.
Right.
And my guys will come up to me like, I don't know why it's going on, but yeah, stuff happens. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we love it, but it's one of those labors of love and love of labor. So
okay. So that brings up the next question is, if you had to choose between normal pot still, hybrid still, or the 3-chamber monstrosity that you're talking about, what would you choose? Not being historically, accurate or anything like that, just producing enough spirit to get out to people. Because I feel like this 3-chamber, the spirit that it's producing isn't a whole lot at the same time. Because if you're getting 7 minutes, 8 minutes of hearts, you're not getting the whole lot of liquid, correct?
No, you're not. But keep in mind, that's only 200 gallons of liquid being distilled at a time.
Okay.
So you do get a similar yield. It's just kind of weird how the math works out.
Okay.
I have actually said that if I had to do it all over again, I would have just done a big chamber still.
Okay.
That's the producer side in me. I have to look at this from a business angle as well, and so does Pete. And we've talked about this a bit. I think like there's sort of the quality minded part of us. We really love what the chamber still does. It's so unique. It's so different. The modern drinkers never had anything quite like it. That being said, our pot still makes, honestly, an equally beautiful distillate. And I think column stills do as well. They're all just very different from each other. So if I looked at it purely from the economics, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. A column still is the way to go. But if I look at it as far as something unique, as far as I mean, and I have to look at it from that angle. I have to look at it from the point of view of, this is a business. How are we going to stand out? What's our point of difference? What's something new that we can bring to the modern palate? Well, let's try to resurrect an old style of whiskey. That people haven't been able to do. So a combination of chamber and pot still, which really fits the bill for the type of whiskey being made in this region 120 plus years ago. Okay, that's something different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I stick by that. I think the pot still chamber kind of combo is proving to be really awesome. I'm really excited for people to try it. So yeah, I mean it's gonna be a lot of fun in 26. I think as that stuff comes of age.
Awesome. So let's talk about that. We're winding down the show now. We're getting towards the end. Let's talk about what you guys produce. Obviously, you're doing rye whiskey, right? But is there other options that you guys have? I heard bourbon and other things. Tell us a little bit about your portfolio and what products you have available as of right now.
Pete, why don't you, Dad, knock that one out.
Available every day, all day, every day is our gin. Our gin is a hot London dry style, but Matt, in his botanicals, wanted to pay homage to our sister company, the beer, Iron City Beer, and so he added a lemon drop hops to the botanicals. Wow. It adds a very beautiful citrus note, and some orris root. You get some. It's just the flavors are really good. You get that backbone of juniper, but it's not overpowering, and you get some very nice balance of the botanicals. We get a lot of positive comments on it. It's award winning, but it makes a great cocktail. And I'd say gin was probably the least spirit I drank prior to coming to Iron City. Right. Now I drink quite a bit of gin. Actually, I was drinking a long drink this afternoon and tried to get Matt to join me, but he had to.
I was gonna say you drink a fair amount of gin these days.
I do. The long drink has been.
Yeah,
my
you're on the gin train. Yeah,
I'm on the gin train.
We did not think we were gonna make gin. I mean, that was not something that we thought. And I've made a lot of gin in my career. I've run a number of distilleries over the years and been kind of a hired gun and consulted on a lot of them as well. And so I've worked on a lot of different gin recipes. And I remember when I was consulting for this project, I didn't know I was going to be running the place. And I remember I was in Quebec at my distillery up there, and I was talking with the team down here, and I said, "Hey, just about to hit send on this email to Vendome for your equipment. I just need to know, like, are you guys going to make gin? It would make my life and yours a lot easier if you just told me now." And the owner was like, "We're a whiskey company. Yeah. We'll never make gin. That's silly."
That's what they say.
I said, "Okay." Yeah, I was like, "All right, man. All right, that's good." So, get their equipment. Fast forward to May of 23, I'm running the show, and I walk into the office and I see the owner sitting there, and he's got a bottle of gin sitting right in front of him. And I knew exactly what was about to happen.
Yep.
And I was like, "Hey, what's going on, Cliff?" He was like, "Matt, what would it take for us to make gin?" And I thought I would nip this in the bud real fucking fast. Well, it would take another still. I was like, that'll be the end of the conversation. Right. Mic drop. I could have just turned around and walked out. But he was like, "Well, go find one."
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Didn't see that one coming. So I went and found a still. So that's what happened. Anyway, so
and now you're making gin.
Now I'm making gin. Yeah. I like making gin. I love
fun.
Gin.
It's fun. Don't get me wrong. And you can play with the botanicals. Like, there's so much stuff you can do with it. Like, you can get regional with it. Like, I know here in Texas, there's a couple of distilleries that are using locally foraged stuff, and so, like, they're just adding it to it, giving it like it's a regionality to the gin as well, which is super cool. It's obviously not whiskey, but at the same time, like, it does have its place in our repertoire, right? I mean, it's one of those things that you can distill and put out to market tomorrow.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. Like we have to talk about. This is one thing we haven't talked about, and Peter can probably talk about this a little more than anybody else.
Sure.
The capital behind the running of this freaking company, like, has to be astronomical, because just buy another still. Like, why not? Just go get one. Find one on Facebook Marketplace or something. Like, and then obviously the 3-chamber being very expensive thing that really doesn't produce. I mean, amazing, awesome, all of the things, but like, it doesn't produce the amount of whiskey that you need it to produce that a column still, 80-foot column still would produce 50,000 gallons of whiskey, whereas this one produces 5 gallons. Like, here you go. Here's 5 gallons of whiskey. Like that's the astronomical benchmark that you have to set yourself at. Just has to be make you pull your hair out.
Yeah, Pete, you want to talk about why we don't have much hair left?
Yeah, I mean, we are extremely fortunate to have a very supportive owner who, like you said, all those steps, every step that Matt explained, slow cooking and cooking on low, and the big guys do it differently to speed up the process and to going in at low proof. The development of the flavors at low proof. I mean, I've had a lot of barrels, tasting barrels, that went in at 125 and are sitting at 140 when we're tasting them. And the flavor development, I think, maturing at low proof is just beautiful. And every step of the way, it's each of those steps, the 40-gallon barrels, the 3 chambers, so the heated warehouse, it's all more expensive for sure. And it's great to have that support and to be able to produce it the way that Matt envisioned it, and have it, and it's I mean, I was gonna say it's paying dividends. It really isn't paying dividends yet, but it's
yet is the operative word.
Exactly.
Soon will be.
The liquid to lips, when we pull it out of the barrel, the dividends are paid in that sense, but not in the cash sense yet. But we're getting there. I said we're doing our first single barrel release a week from tomorrow. Already, there's a little build up, and people are like, "Oh, I'm going to get in line. I want to make sure I have a bottle of your first release," and things like that. And it's pretty exciting. Back to your original question, though, we also do bourbon and we do American single malt. Our American single malt program, secretly we go up to the 3rd floor, away from the beautiful ricks on our 1st floor, and taste some of these whiskeys that are just so different and unique. All these variety of barrels, the colors, the flavors, the noses on them, and they're going to need even more time than the bourbon and the rye, but they're already tasting. I hate you overuse the word amazing, but they are tasting amazing.
No, you don't.
Oh, shucks.
It's fun. I mean, and again, American single malt. I think you had mentioned Westward earlier. I had some few American single malts over my time, but I think these whiskeys are just going to be exciting to the consumer.
I think I'm glad you said that, because that is, if there's one thing that like everybody, every company has like kind of an internal mission statement, right? And sometimes they announce it to the public or whatever, but we talk about this all the time with our group. And we have a lot of guys that work for us that are really like big diehard whiskey nerds, and and we interact with a lot of these folks and everything. And if there's one thing that I've come across over the past few years, is that we all love whiskey, So I don't want to say anything bad about it, but we've all gotten used to seeing the weekly whiskey releases, and it's like, oh great, another cask strength this, and another this was finished in this Chateau's red wine cask, and that's okay, and so some of it, not all of it, there's some really cool bright spots, but particularly from a lot of the larger houses. And the phrase I use all the time with my team is that these guys, like the Diageos and Brown Formans of the world, and I mean no disrespect to the folks that are actually making it, but the C-suite guys that are calling a lot of the shots really would like you to believe that iteration is somehow a substitute for innovation. And that's always really bothered me. And so what you have is you have a category at this point that really runs the risk of people getting bored with it if they, you know, and spirits are hard to innovate in.
Yes.
Not because that there aren't new ideas under the sun, but because it's a big risk. It's a challenge. So, you know, we said very early on that our goal, our mission statement internally, was that we wanted to make whiskey exciting again. It's as simple as that. And I give a lot of talks, and I write a lot of articles, and I teach a lot of classes and workshops and all that stuff. And I talk a lot about innovation strategies, and people are like, well, you know, why don't you do some of the things you're talking about? And I'm like, because it doesn't fit with my brand. No. I'm doing what I can. You know, I want to see other people do some of this stuff, you know, so I'll pitch ideas to people. But, you know, like I used to make whiskey from quinoa, and I loved doing that. That was a lot of fun. Right. And I would do it again, except it doesn't work with my brand. It doesn't work with the story, or, you know, whatever. I want to see more people. I really do feel like we have just scratched the surface of what whiskey can be.
Absolutely.
You know, so I'm really excited to see. So as much as, you know, we hear all these like doom and gloom stories come out in the press about how people are buying whiskey. They are buying whiskey. They're just not buying their whiskey.
Their whiskey. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I
love Jack Daniels. I'm from Tennessee, man. I am. But I think in a way, Jack Daniels kind of forgot what made them Jack Daniels. And, you know, same thing with Jim Beam. And, you know, none of these whiskeys are bad, but I think they kind of forgot what made them special.
Right.
But there are some really exciting things happening out there, and we hope that we're playing a part of that. But, you know, there's the guys like Liberty Pole and Stone Wolf, and then, you know, we're friends with the guys at Hard Truth in Indiana, and, you know, like,
absolutely,
the list goes on. The guys at New Riff, and you know, like, these are folks that are doing really interesting things that are not resting on old recipes and like, you know, rehashed concepts or anything. Like, they're really doing cool stuff.
Right.
And people are celebrating those guys. So, you know, yeah, you can tell me that the industry's down or whatever, but not from where I'm sitting.
Right. Well, and then you talk about somebody like Pat Heiss from Wilderness Trail. Like,
yeah, Pat's another great one.
You know, like this dude's like creating yeast strains just to make weird whiskey, right? Like that is what we need in this industry. It doesn't matter. Like Peter was saying earlier, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Because you want these guys to succeed, because guess what? You're going to succeed. When the craft whiskey movement, and I'd put Wilderness Trail and New Rift in that kind of crafty whiskey. I mean, they're the larger tier of that, kind of like Stranahan's and some of those other ones. But at the same time, when they do that, it makes everybody go, oh, that's weird and different, but I like it. So let's try something. Oh, these guys have been doing it for like 10 years before they did. Like, let's try some of their stuff too. And that's one of the focuses of my show, is to kind of shed a light on craft whiskey in general, right? But like I said earlier, something keeps drawing me back to Pennsylvania specifically because of not only the culture, the climate, the cool story behind it, but also the rye whiskey rebellion and all of the things that just kind of make Pennsylvania what it is. But also like the individual story of each distillery. Everybody from Park Family Distillers, which is a little mom and pop place that they make one barrel, you know, like, to somebody like yourself or Liberty Pole or Dad's Hat. You know, like, all of these people have their own story, but they're so inherently different, but they're the same. And that's what makes my show a little bit different than everybody else's. I hope at least, is that I want to showcase what you guys are doing. Like, I could care less what, like, not okay. Buffalo Trace won't even answer an email from me, so just understand that. And I don't even really want them to, because of the simple fact that, like, people are waiting in line for hours and hours for their whiskey. They're paying thousands of dollars for whiskey that sucks. I'm going to say it. It sucks. It's not great. But at the same time, they're doing a thing, right? So let them do them. I'm going to stay over here in my lane and enjoy some really good whiskey. It's different, but it's also bringing you back to the originality of what whiskey was for. And it was using the commodity grains that you had available to you at the time and turning them into whiskey so that they wouldn't spoil. But also and then they realized, hey, this is an actual thing. We can make money at this and put it in a barrel, and it makes, it actually tastes halfway decent. So it's really cool to me, the history behind it, but also kind of that lore as well, part of it, where it's there's a history, but then there's also a hidden history behind it as well. And that's what's so cool with what Pennsylvania is doing, I think, personally, after having a number of you guys on here. And I put you guys all in all in a box, but at the same time, you're completely different. And that's what makes it so. It's just like me being in Texas. All the Texas distilleries are totally different from each other.
Yes, they are.
But they are all supporting Texas whiskey. And I feel like all of you guys are supporting Pennsylvania whiskey. And that, to me, says a whole lot about your whole guild, Pennsylvania Whiskey Guild, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it is so much fun to deep dive into these special things that you guys are doing that are a little bit different than everybody else. And I cannot wait to see the future. And we can talk about this for a second, and then I'll let you guys go. I can't wait to see the future of what you guys hold, because the gin's great, the bourbon's great, all of that, but that 3-chamber, that all of these things that aren't even to market yet, are they? Are they to market yet, or are they?
Yet.
So
the one we're releasing is a pot still. The 3-chamber was in commission to, like Matt said, August, September of 24. So 3-chamber stuff is still has some time.
Still a little bit out, which to me gives a lot of hype. Hopefully gives a lot of hype to what you guys are doing, and just kind of lifts that up. And I would hope that I would help be a beacon of that, and kind of push you guys a little bit more forward to the forefront to say, hey, these guys are fixing to release this. Y'all need to check it out. And that's kind of my job as the non-sponsored sponsor, that, it's one of those things where I want to do that for you guys, because that's kind of my job, right? To be on this side of it. You guys were gracious enough to come on the show. The least I could do is say, hey, support these guys, because they put a lot of time, money, and energy into this. They're going to need your help. Now, obviously, distribution, all of those things are in factor, right? There's some places that aren't going to be able to get whiskey. I get it. And especially right now around the holidays, I don't even want to talk about distribution around the holidays, because it sucks. Have you ever been to the UPS store? Right now, there's a line out the door, brother, and they're charging you double the price to get one little bitty package to somebody 100 miles away. But anyway, I digress. All right, any last thoughts before we get out of here? I can't thank you guys enough for hanging out with me. It's been a lot of fun. Again, let's talk about where people can find you, website, any of the other social media stuff that you guys have, and then any personal stuff you want to shout out.
I'm not on social media, so I don't know what any of these things
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't. I'm
what
on
is this?
LinkedIn.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm a fucking dullard.
I have to take screenshots and send them to Matt and say, look at this.
Yeah, he does. Wow. He really does. Almost on a daily basis. He's like, hey, have you seen this? I'm like, no, I haven't seen this.
I don't know what you're talking about. Let me get my stone tablet.
Is that what the Insta kids are doing? I don't know. I'm so clueless.
Yeah, but we're icdistilling.com is our website. And then Iron City Distilling is our Instagram and Facebook. And what's that thing you're on, Matt? LinkedIn.
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only one I'm on.
I mean,
Even then, there's moments
think
of
that's
toxicity that I'm like, maybe I should leave this.
I don't know if that's an actual thing. I thought that was like Snapchat or something. But anyway,
it is.
But it's not.
I have people that follow me on LinkedIn. I mean,
You have a lot of followers.
I do.
Shoot,
if you were on
shoot me over your
Instagram,
LinkedIn. I will make sure and put it in the description below.
If I was on Instagram, I'd have like 3 followers. For some
Sweet.
reason on LinkedIn, I have a few. But
there's been a few posts recently that they mention your name. They try and tag you, but they can't. There's a little mask in front of your name. There's
really.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
Who is this person? I don't know.
That is so sad for us, and particularly me, I guess.
File not found.
Yep.
Well,
oh well.
Oh. Wow.
Closing thoughts. We were the fortunate recipients of an invite to a very special pre-prohibition whiskey tasting. We tasted 15, 16 different whiskeys from Pennsylvania and Maryland. It was amazing. It was a group of who's of dusty whiskeys and popular, Instagram posts. I mean, some of them were posting. They visited our distillery. They visited Liberty Pole, and then the next day had a beautiful tasting. And we were tasting, I think it was Large, which is
that sounds right, yeah,
distillery near us, and one of the participants stood up and pointed at Matt and said, "Matt, your whiskey tastes like this whiskey." It was like affirmation of all the effort and the diligence that Matt has done to produce a whiskey that replicates that time period. From people, it wasn't just, and these were very knowledgeable people that have tasted pre-pro whiskey many times,
right?
And tasted our whiskey right out of the barrel, 2.5 years old. Actually, the 3-chamber they tasted out of the barrel is only 1 year old, and we're given very high compliments, and it was really, really special to hear it from.
It meant a lot. It really did. It's very humbling because you just don't know. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I tell my team all the time. I'm like, look, I walk around here and I try to put on some kind of air of like I know what I'm doing, and I have no fucking clue. Like the running gag is, I'm basically just the village idiot who got elected to town council. That's all it is, But I go home at night, and it doesn't matter how many distilleries I've opened or help open or whatever. I stress about it. I lose sleep over it every fucking night. I go home and you just don't know until it comes out and it starts hitting shelves, and you start getting that feedback from people. And then once you do, you're like, oh, okay. It's not that I base my work's worth on other people's eyes or anything like that, but it is validating, when you have these people that are so knowledgeable and that are really invested and they care, and they see that you care, and it becomes really personal.
It does.
So yeah, no, that was a really nice moment. It really was. It was wonderful.
And I think it follows through all of the whiskey world, right? Because me being on the consumer side and the whatever content creating side or whatever you want to call whatever this is, right? It also follows here, because when a video or something that I do hits, right, and people are like, yes, that is what I needed to hear about this whiskey or whatever.
Yeah,
it validates me to say, yes, I am going down the path that I'm supposed to be going down. Because a lot of times, and this will get a little spiritual on you, but we're just a wing and a prayer, right? We're just I don't know what I'm doing here. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just following, and then hopefully we get to the right place. Every person that over the past, year and a half, every person that has been on my show has been a word of mouth reference. And that to me says so much, because like, I'm going to ask you as soon as we turn off of here, give me somebody to talk to, because it's one of those things where, like, I don't care about the big whatever. That's fine. Who do you think is doing cool stuff? Let's go there. And then that, to me, it just envelops this story, this kind of like underground of like what's really going on with this whiskey scene. And to me, that's super cool. And the fact that I get to have a little bit of a part of it makes a big difference. All right, guys. Peter, Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. It has been a lot of fun. I cannot wait for all the releases. Guys, I will have everything in the description down below for you guys to go check them out. Even a LinkedIn if you want to go there. It's up to you. But hey, I can't thank you guys enough for hanging out with me. It's been a lot of fun. Hang on, I want to talk to you after. But y'all be good. It's the holidays. Like, I know it's hectic right now. Everything's going on. I don't know when this is going to release. This might release Christmas week. So just hang in there. It's going to be okay. Your family's fine. Have a drink. You'll be fine. I promise we'll get through this. And then next year we're going to blow and go like we always do. But until next time, y'all be good and keep your spirits up. Peace out.
All right.